Yep, you're good.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Abhishek Cherath, and I'm a third year physics and mathematics major. You might wonder what that has to do with web development. It's just I've been making small little projects for like the past few years now, a few slightly bigger projects, and I'm going to teach you some of what I've learned. Okay, there we go. So what's our goal for today? I'm going to assume most of y'all are beginners-ish. So there's no real prerequisites. Insofar as syntax and APIs and tools and stuff are concerned, as in the how of what we're going to be doing, I'm going to breeze over most of it because I don't think it really matters. Because I think most of us are totally capable of using Google and Stack Overflow, and of course the man pages. So what we are going to do is we're going to try and make something useful, put it on the web, and I'm going to show you the easiest way I think to do that. And easy in this sense is not just the act of getting something up, but also making it possible to extend it, having like a database structure that's not insane, and further discussion around what is both feasible and desirable. So when you're making something, you have three basic questions that you need to answer. Why you're making it, what you're making, and see here, and how you go about doing it. Now, why you do something is important. It's actually probably the most important thing. If your reasons for doing something are just not very legitimate, or if you're just doing something for no real reason, you're not going to stick with it. Now, you'll see more of this later. But second thing, and this is actually the first thing you should answer, is what you're actually making. So today, what we'll be making is we'll be making a simple chess server. It'll be very, very simple, but you'll be able to play a game of chess with somebody else. That's the goal. So now we come to how we're going to go about doing it. This is the point that I don't really want to focus on that much. I will focus on it in the sense that near the end of this, I will be implementing a feature for about 20 to 30 minutes. And, so you'll see in, situ, the debugging and the refactoring and the pain that goes into implementing things. But in some sense, it doesn't really matter because, you figure it out eventually, right? It's monkeys on a typewriter type thing. It'll happen eventually. You just have to suffer for it. So the part that I really want to impress upon you is how small web projects ought to work and what they are. So in this regard, I have too much, in fact, experience. Okay, thank you. All right, so this is a tool that I made with a friend of mine, and we had dreams of starting a company for it, which didn't really work because neither of us really knew what we were doing, and neither of us really liked the project that much. We just thought it was kind of fun. So essentially, what does it do? It's a tool that handles appointments. So if you look at this, you can book an appointment, and as you can see, does it not work anymore? Oh, well, that's embarrassing. Well, so you can put in your details, you schedule, and you get a payment, and it handles payments and everything else, and it works. So the question is, although I think the JavaScript might be broken, which actually will illustrate something else we'll look at in a bit. Okay. Huh. Interesting. Okay, well, never mind that. So the question is now, we implemented a lot of things to make this work. We implemented text messages, notifications, payments, calendar integration, a lot of separate web UIs for no real reason, specific custom pages, and a bunch of different things that hooked together and didn't really, how should I say this? And it was a lot of stuff, and we had two people working on it. And how did we do it? Badly. That's how we did it. We did it badly. So the first thing I want to dispel here is, I guess I can just stick with this, is this myth of like rock star developers, yeah? Like people who can like do everything and implement massive projects in like a weekend. They don't exist. There are none, and you're not one of them. I'm not one of them. The challenge with making a project is to think about it in a way that is doable by the team that you have. So when I say we're going to make a chess server, I don't mean to say we're going to make leeches. That's not possible. We can't do that. Although I will say that leeches is made by one person, but that was over a period of multiple years, and this was a person with like 35 years of experience or something like that. So yeah, that's an important thing to realize, that a project has to be limited in scope. If you're going to do it as one person or two people or three people or four people. And otherwise, like the bigger it gets, you'll still be able to do it, right? The lower bar for bad work when it comes to web dev is really low. But it won't be maintainable. If it breaks, you won't be able to fix it. 6 months later, you won't remember how it works. It'll just be a disaster. So don't do that. Make things that you know you can make work. That being said, there are tools we can use to be able to worry about fewer things. So we can make a start on building things without being bogged down in like the details of system administration and other things. This is basically it. So like the key is to try and reduce your own cognitive load. And for my money, I think the best way of going about doing this is to use like the family of like serverless tools that exist around today. Now, serverless itself is something of a misnomer, right? Because it makes you think that you're building an application without a server. Actually, before that. Before I go to like explaining the serverless stuff, we're going to have like a little bit of a discussion about like what a website is. Now, the reason I bring this up is because there are more things that are like described by URIs today than websites, right? You have APIs, and you have like mysterious public URLs that link to things that they shouldn't really link to in private microservice architectures and stuff like that. So we're going to define a website as a thing that the browser retrieves from a URL, which is a resource. So our final goal is to make a thing that a browser can retrieve from a URL that does something interesting. Now, to that end, we might have to make more URLs and like other stuff, but that's the end goal. It's always good to keep that in mind. I don't know how that happened, but okay. So to that end, I am going to try and use a serverless architecture. What does that mean? Well, a server is essentially like the thing that serves your website. So if you want to show a website, it has to be somewhere on some computer. And that computer is the server. But if you don't have to worry about what that computer is, you call that serverless. It's a bad name, but such is life. Yeah? Also, if any of you ever have any questions, I am actually like I get to like talk to the chat through like people in the Zoom room, and I also like I'm looking at the chat on my phone, so feel free to ask. We're going to make a very simple chess server, and I mean very, very simple. So this kind of thing. It's going to be just a, like plain text ASCII board, and with plain text moves and like the state and everything else. And I'm going to show you how you can do this as one person reasonably with something that you can both maintain and that you can run and that will work. And be useful to somebody, maybe. So the last part is a little bit dubious. So this is why it's very important to remember that the best computer code is code that doesn't exist. The moment you've written a line of code, it's doing something and it's taking a space both in your brain and in this computer and in like just it's horrible. So if you can get away with doing something without writing code, and I don't mean like here like using like GUIs instead or something like that. No, I mean like not giving instructions to the computer. If you can convince people that they don't need a feature, that's always better than implementing a feature. Always. Unfortunately, we can't always do that, but that's always good to remember. So always minimize the amount of code you're writing. And this doesn't mean getting rid of the new lines in your code. It means reducing the. There are actually like measures for like describing what kind of like level of complexity you have in a program. But a good proxy is to just like, if you can think about what it's doing in your head, and like you can like think about everything that it's doing, it's like 7 things. So that's the most you can store in your brain. That's probably good. Once you go beyond that, life becomes harder, and you have to like you have multiple tools. It's just not fun. So let's plan. What is the minimum needed for a chess game? We need the board. We need the pieces. We need 2 players. We need the rules, and we need the game state. So that's all we're going to implement. We're not going to implement users or profiles or histories, just have a URL for the game with session tokens for auth for both users. The second part you can ignore for now. If anybody has questions about that, please ask me. I was trying to implement it, but it turns out to be a little bit more complicated than I thought. And, so just for now, let's just stay with the URL and link. And there needs to be a database to store the game state, to store the moves. So what we're going to start with is we're going to start with the board and the pieces. For the database right now, we're using Dynamo. It's not what I would choose if I were to like make this sort of like a long-term project, because again, it is proprietary Amazon software, and but bear with me here. Web server we'll use Express, very nice, very simple, and very similar to every other kind of web server. And to keep things simple, we'll have 0 client-side logic. I'll explain what that means as we go. And as a tool to deploy and manage like the deployment, we'll be using serverless, which is they explain themselves really badly on their website, I will say. But essentially, it just like puts your stuff onto a computer somewhere, and you have to do a bunch of configuration for it. But it's easy, and because AWS has a massive free tier, it's basically free for anything reasonable that you might end up making. Again, if you have questions about that, get back to me. I will help you out if you have any issues. But for now, let's look at like a thing, shall we? So here is a thing. Oops. Here is a thing. This that you see here is our entire chess server. This just one page, about 30, 40 lines of code. We could probably reduce it further. Probably should reduce it further. And as we implement things, I will show you an example of refactoring some of these GET requests into a single GET request. and we'll see that. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is before I get into like explaining how like a web server does what it does and why it does what it does, I'm going to ask if anybody has any general questions. You can put it in the chat. And so, for example, if you're wondering, you know, okay, I have some code here, but like, where do I run it if I want it to run a website? Or how do I get like a custom domain or something like that? I just want to like gauge like the level of like questions I'll be getting roughly. Right, there's a 15-second delay, yes, so I have to wait for a bit. I'll wait for a minute. No, everyone just wants to get down to like the actual details of the work itself. Okay, such is life. So when you think I want to implement a chessboard, what do you do? Well, if you're going to do it from an assignment, obviously you'd go about like figuring out how to make a bit board, how do you implement it, how do you implement the rules, do you want to do it object oriented, do you want to use more functions, how do you want to do validation to check if a rule is legitimate, yada yada yada, blah blah blah. But again, if you're going to do that, that is other stuff that you have to like take the mental stress for. You have to like, be like, oh, okay, I have to worry that there are no bugs in my implementation of a chessboard, which is why you use a library. Now, there is a lot to be said about overdependence on libraries in the JavaScript world. But for this purpose, making things quickly and easily, it works mostly. So what we're going to use is we're going to use this thing here. It's called chess.js. Very simple library. It's not actually much. It's like I think like 400 lines of code or something. But what it does is it implements a class for a chessboard, which takes a nice little parameter that explains the current state of the board. So if we go to the place where our board is deployed, which is here, you'll see that that's what it does. You get a chessboard out of it. And this is the current state of some game that I was playing a while back, but don't judge me. Okay, so the question now is how we go about actually thinking about things, right? So we want to like make this chess game. So let's consider. Okay, so we want to make it simple. So if you want to make it simple, let's not have a menu or anything because that's a waste of time. Let's just say if you go to the root domain of the website, so let's call it simplechess.com. It just starts the game immediately. That's the root path. So when my browser goes to that path, and when your browser goes to a path in like the link here, like if I just type in, for example, google.com, what this is doing is it's sending a get request, which just means get the resource to that link, and it just gets the link, yeah, and that's a get request. So we just want the basic get request to the source. For Google presents me this, just give me a chessboard, and like I should be able to share that link with someone to play a game. So that's what we do. So we make this, and that's what this thing does. So it creates a game ID. For a game ID, we use a unique ID. For that, we have another library which just generates unique IDs. Don't really worry about that. It's just a string. You use it as like a key for the database. Not that big of a deal. It's in the URI. It's useful. We create a new chessboard. This here again, I should. Can you guys see the code without any issue? Or should I zoom in a little bit? Yes? No?
The code seems fine.
Seems fine? Okay, sounds good. All right. Okay, so let's keep going then. So we start the thing, we make a chessboard. If you're wondering what the FEN thing is, that's just the word that's called Forsyth-Edwards notation, something like that. Essentially, it's just a way of storing the state of a chessboard. So we create a little chessboard, we store its state, we store the players, and then we redirect to another link which has the game at, which is where the game is. And that's this link here. That's what you see over here. So with the URI after, we get like a nice little game link. And we should be able to share this game link with people to get the thing to run, basically, to like play a game with somebody. That's the goal. Okay. So then we have to define what happens when you go to that link, right? So, well, when you go to that link, it should get the current state of the game, which means just getting that from the database. If any of you are wondering what all the like async await stuff is, if you're not familiar with that, or the try-catch stuff, it doesn't really matter. It's just a way of referring to variables, like using like a database, and like doing some error handling. So if something goes wrong, or if there's a permissions issue or something like that. Again, it's documentation stuff. When we implement a new feature, you'll see like, how somebody who's looked at far too much documentation looks at documentation. Okay, so you start a new chessboard and you send the plain text ASCII board back. Now, this also has certain advantages and disadvantages. So at this point, some of you might be wondering, right? Why go about doing it this way? Why would you not just send the FEN of the board, right? Or just send the moves and handle the chessboard in the client the way a modern chess server like Lichess or chess.com would do it? And the answer to that is that this is simpler to implement. And it also has this like neat little quirk, right? Which is that I could play games in the terminal if I wanted to, using a terminal HTTP client or a terminal web browser very easily. Because I could just curl the site, like look at the state of the board, and if I wanted to send a move, just send a move. Let's move a pawn here. Um, oops. Um, I forgot how notation worked. My bad. Isn't that fun? So how do we do that? Well, we have to make a move, right? And how we make a move is we get the current state of the board and we, make the move right here. So then we match the game ID. That just gives us the current state of the board, right? All right. So how do we make a move? Well, we give it a move and we make a move, which is just the chess.move.move. And the move notation comes from like standard chess notation, which is just E5, E4, that kind of thing. If you're not familiar with that, it just describes like the board is split up into like 64 squares, A through H and 1 through A, and you just get like a 64, like an 8 by 8 board. And it's indexed the way you would expect an array to be indexed. A1 refers to the square on the bottom left, A8 refers to the square on the top right, and so on. Okay, so the question is, can you guys think of a problem with the way this move function currently is implemented that is sort of bad for playing a game of chess? I mean, I'll give you a minute to think about it, but there's a lot of very bad things about it. This is sort of why I wrote it, because I thought it'd be fun to like refactor on the fly here. So what is so terrible about it? Why is it so bad? It is bad, but why? And Any ideas? So Cynthia, that actually is not the case, because this is the reason we use the what's it called, the chess.js thing, right? It does move validation for us. Unfortunately, it doesn't throw the error messages in the way I expected, so it doesn't just come up in the try catch block. Wrong chess moves are also caught by that. But what? How is this working? It's just like taking a move, right? It doesn't validate who the user is or anything like that. So if you know the game ID, you could just make a move. And even more unfortunately, what this means is you could move for your opponent. So that doesn't really work now, does it? Exactly. Yeah. So that's a very bad way of doing it. But it does indeed at least make a move on the board. So you can actually make moves on the board, which is actually surprisingly fun to do. Yeah, especially because like nobody's really used to doing this in the terminal. At least I'm not. I don't really. Uh, why isn't NF6 working? It also seems to be a little bit of a bug, which I'm. Oh, it has to be capital N. I see. Okay. Oh, I see. That's why it's not working in the browser, because like the browser changes like the URL strings to all small for some annoying reason. But okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's another little bug that we can like work on debugging, which is nice. Or actually, just do upper should work, right? So yeah. Incidentally, so if we notice something, I can go to the link for this game here. So we're having some early debugging, I suppose, but this gives us the game state right now. You will notice that if I try and do like a move in the browser that involves a knight or a bishop, presumably. Actually, let's try knight c6. The other thing you're noticing, of course, is that oh, that worked. Okay, never mind. I don't know. Okay, the other thing you're noticing, of course, is that there is no like way to know whose move it is. You could count, I guess, but even that wouldn't really work. There's no way to know whose move it is, except by trying and like waiting for it to throw an error. So this is all really bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to think of like interesting ways and easy ways to fix this. But before that, we're going to take a few more slides. Okay. So this is the user flow, right? Base route starts new game ID has the game that's running, then the user can send the link to player 2 and they play. That's all. So for that, you're going to start trying to implement the stuff that's necessary now. Let me see. So let's start by like around 1:30 right now, right? This is a time when I was trying to like start trying to implement a feature. What do you guys want? What do you think we should start with? Do you want to start with something like difficult, like authentication? I don't know. Or do you want to start with something quite simple, like maybe just displaying at least who it is to move or something like that? No questions? Well, I think I will do authentication. Nah, let's start with something really simple to like get like a little bit warmed up. Oh, authentication. Oh, okay. All right. We'll do authentication. Fine. But just to get ourselves into the flow, then I'm going to do something really tiny first, and then we'll do authentication. So this should take around a minute or so. So, for example, first thing is we need to know who is to move, right? this is kind of an issue if we don't know who is to move. So maybe the chess.js thing can tell us who is to move. Like let's say it has let's hope it has a function that tells us who's to move. And this essentially is the basic input loop when you're doing like this kind of development, is that you go, okay, time to find, I need something in my thing. I'm going to see, I'm going to see how if there's a way to find out who it is that is to move. Right. History. In check, in checkmate, in draw, in stalemate, in 3/4 repetition. Returns a move if the move is legal, otherwise returns a null. I see. So it doesn't return an error. That's why I was having issues. Right. So can it tell us whose move it is? We might have to store it as like a separate thing in the database then. That's interesting. Load FEN. That is incredibly strange because I thought I checked. Because I know the FEN notation actually tells you whose move it is. Yes, there's a .turn function. I'm just blind. Okay, never mind. I should have figured that's what it'd be called. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're just gonna add like a nice little line over here that also this should just have like the. There is no reason why the escape should be there. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna tell people that it is like the turn to move. So if you have any like questions about syntax, you can ask them, but you can also look them up. And this essentially just takes it's pretty clear. Yeah? It just takes the variable and like tells it, it's this person's turn to move, send that. But here we see something interesting, right? What do we see? We see that like I'm writing this line over here, and I'm also doing that over here. So this is an indication that these two parts could probably be put together with some fancy regex like tricks for the game ID here, and just assign like if there's no move, then give this function here, and that might be possible. So that's like a mark of refactor. So you just put in a comment and say refactor these two routes below into one. That's an indication, right? That's just a little thing you can tell. It's like, I could change that. But okay, so this should tell us whose turn it is to move now. So this is just like a little bit of a warm-up. Yeah, this is not like a difficult thing to implement. And then we just deploy this. If you're wondering about this thing here, like how I'm doing this and how I'm getting it on the internet. Oh, also another thing I should do, and another thing I'm going to do live because I think it's fun. Okay, there we go. It's deployed. So if we go to this page now, so you see here what happened? I used a normal string instead of a template string. You see, these are kind of things that like Visual Studio Code tells you, but because I'm too stubborn to use it, and because my current like environment for Vim doesn't work properly, I don't know. So I have to like redeploy stuff. Oh, so it probably start another new line. Well, such is life. I'll put this up on Git right after, so then like everyone can have a look. If you want to like refactor stuff a little bit, you can do that. The other thing, if you're wondering about this thing, how I'm deploying it, I'm using the serverless like CLI tools. Basically, it just deploys it to AWS with Lambda functions and to AWS Dynamo. The configuration for this is non-trivial, but it's also not important in the sense that this matters a lot more. Eventually, you can find somewhere to put it, but there's a lot of like you just have to read a bunch of guides to like figure it out. It's annoyingly non-trivial actually, but like let's get back to this so we can like do some fun stuff. Wait, what? Oh, this is the other enemy of like the web developer. This is cache issues. There is nothing I hate more than cache issues. So that's a cache thing. This is something you will have happen to you. It happens when like the browser cache hasn't updated, but your site has changed, and it doesn't know that, right? So it just sticks with it. So now you know who's to move at least. So there we go. We have some improvement. Yeah, it's white to move. The capital letters are white, the small letters are black. So we can have like a little bit of instructions in the CLI tool. It's very simple. It's quaint, right? It feels very hackery. But yeah. So what are we going to do next? What are we going to do next? Next, let's figure out how to do our the authentication. And this is an interesting problem, right? Because like let's define our terms. What do we want? We want that like when somebody goes to the link, a game starts and they become player one. That makes sense? We then want that player one to be the only person able to make moves, and like to move for player one. And I guess for now, for simplicity's sake, let's just have player one be white, and player two, who's the second person to join the game, will be black, and they have to move for black, and only they will be allowed to move. So what is the correct way of doing this? Let's think. The correct way of doing this is probably to have like a database for users and to have like public key, private key authentication. That's hard. And it's doable, but it'll take time. So that's how you should do it. But let's say we just want something to like work and with some reason we really want to play a chess game in 15 minutes time. What do we do then? Well, then we have to speed up. So what's a faster way of doing this that would like deliver a playable game in the presence of without assuming malicious actors? So let's just say it's just two people who need to play a game of chess and they're not going to try and hack the system or do anything bad. Well, we could just have like a UID, right? And just like say, hey, anybody who claims to be this UID should be able to make the move. That's one way of doing it. That's actually a good way of doing it. We can actually add sophistication to that and we'll have proper full authentication using a library, presumably. Okay, so how would we do that? So I actually set this up slightly because I have like these like fields in the database for player one and player two. So what do we do here? What do we do to go away Discord? What do we do to make player one and player two exist? So we need to give them strings, yeah? What's a good way of doing that? We could create new UUIDs for them, I suppose. I guess because like this is another thing. If you can help it, just reuse stuff you already have. That's the easiest way to do things. But then that begs the question: how do we actually check that like somebody is making the move with like a certain UUID in like a non-hacky way? That's not easy to figure out, is it? Well, let's see. I have an idea. Is it a good idea? I don't know, but we'll see, right? So let's say we make a UUID here. So this just gives us like, this is just some string that we use for identification. It's not a big deal. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into our move here, and we're going to yeah, I guess this is what we do now. So essentially, if you just like, increase the get request path, this, I will say, I was surprised by how much you can actually put into like an address on a browser. You can put like I think like 600, 500 characters, something like that, before the browser starts complaining. So you don't have to be shy about it. You can actually just like literally put like key value JSON in the browser string if you want. It's called the param string. Um, oh, actually, that's probably a more sophisticated way of doing this. You might have noticed this when you do like Zoom stuff. There's like a PWD string, right? That's not the password itself; it's the hash of the password. But again, hashes complicated, cryptography hard. So so what we're going to do is we're just going to do it this way. So what we're going to do is we're going to just like refactor this, and we're going to look up the Express documentation to figure out how to do query strings. I preferably, so this is another thing. Yeah, it's like you can always find like a bunch of websites that have like like references, but very often that's outdated. I always recommend first things first, go to the documentation of the tool that you're actually using. Look at tutorials after that. Okay, now give me a query. I want a query. So query. Hmm. Okay, so the query will be the like stuff after that, right? So we have to enable the query parser. That's confusing. So now you look at a tutorial. So query string express. Okay, so it is actually that simple. Very nice. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna look at our thing here, and instead of putting it this way, we're just gonna like say there's the query string. Why are we not able to put the game ID in the query string? Actually, that might actually help us with the refactor we wanted without doing any fancy regex stuff. So console.log rec.query. Rec.query. So what we're gonna do is we're going to do rec.query. Okay, so we're gonna put it before move. So if rec.query dot move, this is an object, yes. Okay, rec.query.move is, or user rather, is equal to what do we want? DB item dot player1 dot s, yeah. Player1 dot s. This leads to another issue that I just realized that in the sense that this has a problem in because actually that's an interesting issue because now the player has to know their string, they has to know their user ID. So these are the kind of like issues you like get into. Like, how do we make that trivially available to them? That's not easy. You can't send back a query string as far as I know. How do we do that? 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 Huh. Well, so now we just want a game, right? So like, because we just want a game, what we're going to do is we're just going to say players, you suck. We're just going to let you play with white and black. So the first player is W, the second player is like this thing. So we're just going to have the link be rec.query.user is equal to db item.player1.s. Instead of doing all that, is say dot color is equal to actually that's actually probably the correct approach now that I think about it. But dot color is equal to turn. Incidentally, we're referring to this twice, so we should probably put that into a single thing. But chess dot turn, and if rec.query color is equal to chess dot turn not equal to, then throw an error. Wrong player. Something like that. This essentially is the idea of it. Okay, so now what you would have is, if I submit this, at the very least, users will be able to like play with a little bit of work. Of course, you could still move your opponent, which is bad, but this is the process to making that go away. Okay, so for example, now if I try to do well, whose turn is it? This incidentally is also why when you do this kind of thing, you should always use like we should be doing that refactor, because again, I'm having to change it in two places here, which is bad. But this is the process of like work. And yeah, I'm hoping like me looking through this stuff is like helping you guys. Like this is how I learned, is by looking at people better than me make mistakes. And hey, there we go. The new line doesn't work now for some reason, but because there isn't one, of course. Classic. Anyway, so it's not, but like it's still understandable. So now it's white to move. So let me play knight g5. So if I try and just play knight g5 now, so what's the issue now? Did I break it? I did break it. Amazing. I got rid of the move. So now I was looking for something that doesn't exist. What a disaster. Okay, no. So the idea was that we put the move into the query. Yeah. So what we can do is we can put the move into a query here. So now we can construct our request like so with a query string. How do query strings work? You go up a question mark and name, no, move equals ng5 and color equals w. Oh, now curves being annoying. So these are the kind of things you have to live with. But it's not actually played the move, is it? ng5 and color equals w. So this should work, but it doesn't. White to move, right? Yeah. So what about something like, is it big check or something? B E that would work. KE2? Let's try that. No. Why not? It doesn't throw the error either. This is unfortunate. Should that be no slash here? Should it be right after? What about in the browser? Copy. Anyhow, I'll stop this in a minute, but essentially this is the process by which you are expected to go about figuring out how to do things. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Today, it seems to be doing something interesting. So how do you debug? Well, you should probably be using a logging tool if you're going to actually do this. But again, that's more infrastructure to set up, more things to worry about. So, oh, I see what the issue is. Oh, well, okay, so we can do like another bit of refactoring that we needed to do, and then like end because like it's doing like it's confused about which of these paths to actually use. Well, okay. Move is equal to rec.query.move. Well, what we can do is if rec.query.move, then do all of this. Otherwise, don't do all of that. And so I think we can just essentially get rid of this entire thing, which is nice. This essentially means if rec.query.move is defined, because otherwise it should come out as a null value if I remember how JavaScript works. If I don't remember how JavaScript works, which is more likely, then it won't do that. But deploy. Deploy, and I'll put this up on GitHub right after. But okay, I have 5 minutes to give you guys a bit of a. Hey, look at that! So there we go. So now we have a way of implementing like colors. That was pretty cool, right? So that essentially is the loop of like this sort of development. Now you'll see if I try to make white move again, let's say I try to move my king back because that's a bad move, it just won't work. It's supposed to throw an error and it's supposed to return that error, which is also not doing, but at least it won't work. So If I try to make black do a move, let's make black move their king, because why not? Color is equal to black. Yes. Then the black king moves. As you can see, it does work. This is a chess server. You can play a game on it. Now there's a lot of like sugar that needs to be go around to make things actually useful, right? But what I want to discuss is this question. Now that we've seen like the difficulty of actually doing this kind of thing, right? It's not easy. It's not easy. There's always a lot of like edge cases to deal with. Like, everything's not, it's not trivial, right? Like users, non-trivial, history, non-trivial, databases, non-trivial, configuration, non-trivial. But what's the point of doing it? Why make Lichess but worse? Who's going to use it? If no one's going to use it, why do it? And that's where the philosophy of making small web things comes in. If you're trying to do things better than like an established player in like that space, you're not going to succeed. It's not going to work. You're one person, two people, The amount of arrogance in that is just pointless, really. But a command line chess client, that'd be kind of cool, wouldn't it? Maybe because it's just simple, I could use it to explore different protocols. Maybe people would be interested in that. Maybe I could like work with like some different kinds of transports. And maybe it's just cool. And that's the thing to keep in mind. What's fun is doing things, well, it varies for people, right? But I don't think very many people enjoy doing things badly just to get things done, right? So if you want to take something away from this, I want everyone to think about more consciously about what you're doing, and why you're doing it before you go to the how. Before trying to implement like a feature or something, ask yourself if it's really necessary or if it's just adding complications for no reason. Before trying to change frameworks to something, ask yourself if that like really helps or if it just adds cognitive load for you. And remember that is your primary and like greatest resource when you're working on these projects. The money actually doesn't really like come into it that much. Like DigitalOcean, like if you want to like put something up on a VPS or something, that doesn't cost that much. You can run open source software. That's all fine. But it all costs mental time. Administration and infrastructure is a cost on your brain. More code is a cost on your brain. Having to like manually set up databases is a cost on your brain. So try and get rid of that. If you do things in a serverless fashion, you will have this to worry about, and that's it. Hopefully, ideally. Sometimes that's not the case. But yeah. So I'll be releasing this on GitHub if anybody wants to take a look. And if anyone has any questions, please hit me up. I am Abhishek. I'm in the Discord. I'm supposed to change it to my real name, aren't I? I'll do that. But yeah. Thank you very much for your time. And I hope you guys learned something from seeing me struggle for a bit. Yeah, I think, yeah.
And thanks so much for hosting this workshop.